The door to foreign home ownership was slammed shut by the Labour New Zealand First coalition in 2018.
This is about the ability of New Zealanders to own their own home.
And not without protest from the opposition benches.
And what has been the result of this attack on people with foreign-sounding names?
Now a slight tweak cracks the door open for wealthy investors to buy or build one luxury home.
We've found the balance.
What's the case for this carve-out in the foreign buyers ban? Why do we have a ban in the first place, and why does Winston Peters' name keep coming up? Kia ora, ko Annika Smith aho. Anei te pūrongo tō rangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. In her first post-cabinet press conference after the 2017 election, then Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced the Overseas Investment Act was going to change. Residential housing would be reclassified as sensitive, effectively blocking foreigners from buying existing homes. Labour's David Parker argued homes were for living in, not commodities to be traded internationally at the bill's third reading.
In a recent quarter, 20% of the homes sold in Central Auckland were sold to overseas buyers, and 10% of homes in the whole of the Queenstown Lakes District Council were sold to overseas buyers. Two of our most expensive housing markets in New Zealand, and it's no coincidence. These matters are linked.
National and ACT voted against the bill at the time, with National's Judith Collins accusing Labour of selling out to New Zealand First for power.
This is a bill without principle. It is a bill to try and cynically blame foreigners, particularly those with Chinese-sounding names, for a government that has no other policy in which to actually improve and increase house ownership in New Zealand.
While ACT leader David Seymour argued it would scare off much-needed foreign investment.
Right back to the time that Kupe sailed up on the beach with a wakahaurua and a couple of kuni pigs, we have been bringing foreign capital to this country, and we've never looked back. So it remains in the construction of housing today. But this government is out of touch with that reality.
New Zealand First's Mark Patterson put forward his party's case that the ban was about restoring New Zealanders' right to live in their own home, pointing to teachers on strike protesting outside Parliament that day as a prime example of why change was needed.
It's not the silver bullet, but when you're in a government in this situation with those people, like the teachers out there, unable to get on a housing ladder, you pull every lever in your arsenal, every last one.
The bill passed, setting up the foreign buyers ban that remains in place today. The issue was revived for a brief moment in 2023, when National campaigned on letting foreigners buy homes worth more than $2 million, subject to a 15% tax. New Zealand First quickly put an end to that talk during coalition negotiations, blocking any repeal of the ban whatsoever. Since then, the subject has largely been off the agenda, except for the occasional murmur of discussions behind the scenes. In one interview, the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, conceded National's $2 million threshold had been too low. In another, the New Zealand First leader, Winston Peters, said he was open to revisiting the rules for the right investor. This week, they revealed they'd reached agreement. The right investor had been identified. Under the change announced on Monday, those on a so-called golden visa will be allowed to buy or build one luxury home worth at least $5 million. Mr. Luxon says it's a happy compromise.
We had a really constructive conversation. If Winston has been very constructive and positive about the need to attract investment to New Zealand. But again, both of us don't want to see what we've seen in the past, which is lots of speculation in our property markets and lots of frothiness and flipping of houses and selling houses to each other. That doesn't actually drive our economy.
There have been more than 300 applications for the Active Investor Plus program since it was launched in April. The Golden Visa offers two pathways to residency, a minimum investment of $5 million over 3 years in higher risk ventures, or $10 million over 5 years at a lower risk threshold. The government says if all of the applications are approved and proceed, it could draw $1.9 billion into the economy. Winston Peters says the $5 million sale threshold will protect 99% of homes on the market right now from being sold to foreigners.
We signalled it some time ago because we realised that there was far too much that was vague about the right to invest in this country. And when I say the right to invest in this country, we just couldn't get this country to be attractive enough, and we have to do something about that. So one of the things was for people who are putting in $5 million or much more, and many have, they could buy a house of that value as well. Now, that leaves them only being able to access less than 1% of the market, but at least it's an incentive for an investor to come to this country.
Immigration Minister Erica Stanford says it's a simple change that will only encourage those who get a golden visa to invest more money here.
The most important thing for those 300, we know, is if they have a base here and have a home here, they spend more time here. And there's a gentleman in the room I was just speaking to about exactly this. He has a home because he bought it before the ban, and he spends more time here, and he has gotten to know the local landscape, he's gotten to know more businesses, and now he's investing more. This has never been about the initial investment, it's been about the follow-on investments. So the longer they spend here, the more they'll invest.
Real estate firms and venture capitalists have welcomed the changes, saying they're already seeing increased interest in luxury properties.
Confidence is everything, and so I think for the luxury market, this will be a good indication for vendors that if they are looking to go through their next journey in life, that this gives them confidence to actually start that process.
This will encourage listings, so we might see a few more in the $5 million plus bracket come to market now because of this.
What the government struggles to see, but certainly happens, is the follow-on investment that happens by the individuals, right? Usually they bring their money in and that's visible, and then after the fact they invest significantly more in other companies and other projects, and that has a real benefit.
Labour leader Chris Hipkins says the only people this will benefit are the mega wealthy.
Christopher Luxon's got his priorities all wrong. He's rolling out the red carpet for wealthy foreigners wanting to buy New Zealand homes, while Kiwis struggle to get on the housing ladder. It's just not right. The advice that we had in government was that you can't disconnect the houses at the top end of the market from houses further down the market, because if you push up the price of homes above $5 million, the people who might otherwise have wanted to buy those move to the next bracket down. That pushes up the price of the next bracket down, which means further buyers push down into the lower bracket, and you actually push up all the price of all homes.
He went as far as accusing Winston Peters of going back on his word.
I'll quote directly from Winston Peters. In a property-owning democracy, the government's first priority for home ownership should be New Zealanders, not allowing a gross distortion of the market by deep-pocketed foreigners who don't care about struggling Kiwis, who just want profits and an asset bulk hole if things go wrong in their own country. That was Winston Peters in 2023.
Here's Winston Peters speaking to Ingrid Hipkiss on Morning Report this week.
The problem was we had rampant purchases in this country when people were using this country as a bolt hole, not even coming here. That is, they were buying offshore, never coming here, hoping one day to flick it on. And it was a bit like what happened in Canada and Vancouver in particular. They were even using the same sort of money to get into the country, so recycling the same money. We were subject to some serious duplicity and cheating. So that's why the total ban happened. And this very, very, very minor adjustment will attend to the benefits of the investor.
There's still buyers who don't live in New Zealand though, right? So you've long opposed foreign buyers, as we've established. How do you explain that to your supporters?
Well, I explain to our supporters because they're rational and reasonable. They'll understand that accessing less than 1% of the market and that they as supporters can access over 99% of the market does not mean competition for them. We're talking about the very, very top end of the market, and the greater problem we've got for home access is at the lower and middle end of the market.
Winston Peters insists the carve-out is just that, and the foreign buyers ban remains. He says the change won't affect the wider housing market for New Zealand buyers. Bailey's Queenstown Chief Executive, Stacey Coburn, agrees.
By and large, it's certainly not going to affect the major sort of buying pool. It's not going to affect first-time home buyers. There are a lot of owners out there who probably now think their property's worth $5 million. There's no doubt. And I think this recent announcement and change in the criteria, you're going to see what's going to entice a lot more owners to list their property for sale. It will certainly boost activity in the upper end of the market.
But others, like Queen City Law's Managing Director Marcus Beveridge, thinks house prices will swing upwards again.
If we end up attracting, under those golden visa programs, say, well, it could be anywhere between $2 to $5 billion per annum, it just means there's a lot more money sloshing around the sides, more commercial transactions happens, more business happens, and it is inevitable consequence of that property prices will increase. And then when you're getting a few really large acquisitions happening, yes, it will impact on the entire market. So yes, property prices will ultimately increase.
Mr Beveridge sees this as a good thing, particularly for Auckland. He says it's taken far too long to get to this point.
The whole thing has been pedestrian and embarrassing, really. The fact that we haven't tweaked it for people that we're asking to come and pump serious money into our economy, that we haven't allowed them a much easier path, and it's taken 2 years to make the change, is, look, if it was private sector heads would roll, and I mean, sure, it's a coalition government, but it just lacks common sense to have waited for so long to do this, because when you're trying to promote New Zealand as an investment destination, and you take people through it, and then you get to the end of it and you sort of mumble under your breath that you can't buy a family home, it's just embarrassing, really, professionally.
The concerns that some people have raised, Labor has been quick to criticise the foreign buyers ban carve out, saying it's rolling out the red carpet for the ultra-wealthy and it'll only encourage people, the ultra-wealthy, to come to New Zealand and set up bolt holes. Do you think those fears are overblown, or is there some credibility and truth in that?
I, as being a bit of a provocateur, just said it's a rule that favours the rich at one stage, but it's all a bit of a red herring, to be perfectly honest, because under the rules before of this carve-out change, an overseas investor who came under the golden visa, if they chose to live here, they could buy a house here anyway by way of getting an overseas investment exemption for the princely sum of about $5,000, and it take about 2 weeks. The OIA would say, okay, if you have got your residence here under any category, to be honest, and you're going to stay here for the next year and live here indefinitely, then we will grant you consent to be able to buy a home. So in some ways the thing is a bit of a beat up, but it's all about perception, right? So now we can say to wealthy people who want to come and invest $10 or $5 million here, that they can also have a family home to live in, just one. And I don't think most fair-minded Kiwis would have any problem with that. Labor discharging its opposition duties is trying to come up with something, but I don't think many people, except for those who hate the 1%ers, will kind of attach too much credibility to opposition just for the sake of opposition.
National and New Zealand First might finally agree on the carve-out, but that doesn't necessarily mean everyone is happy. On Morning Report, RNZ's acting political editor Craig McCulloch expressed some scepticism at all the talk of a happy compromise.
Some people here are perhaps a bit happier than others. It's quite a curious development, really, this compromise, when you look at that coalition. It's not unexpected, but it is still a bit unexplained, because Winston Peters suggested this morning in his interview with you that his starting point was this $5 million threshold, and that he then held out for that $5 million mark. But his real starting point, people will remember, was no foreign buyers at all. New Zealand First helped introduce this ban. He came into government staunchly opposed to any easing of it. It is written there in the coalition agreement that there will be no repeal of the ban, and indeed there hasn't been a full repeal. But this is a relaxation for sure, regardless of how Winston Peters characterises it. This is a relaxation of that ban. Now, on the face of it, it seems that he has been convinced that the ban, his ban, was putting off overseas investors from bringing their money here. That was quite the concession, I thought, this morning to you. He is satisfied, though, that the changes that are being made have sufficient constraints. I'm still a bit perplexed by the length of the negotiations here. Mr. Peters suggested that he was holding out for that price threshold, but Christopher Luxon quite a long time ago conceded that National had its $2 million mark too low and that $5 million would be more appropriate. So one has to wonder exactly what has been thrashed out behind those closed doors.
Yeah, is it? I mean, Winston Peters was saying that his supporters would understand because they're rational people. How risky is it for him? And particularly with Labour, we're going to speak to Chris Hipkins shortly, but I think Chris Hipkins was saying yesterday, their policy is New Zealand First's old policy.
Indeed, an incredibly risky proposition for New Zealand First when you consider for how long that party has campaigned on a policy of keeping Kiwi homes in Kiwi hands. This is a nationalist party. It is deeply sceptical of immigration, sceptical of foreign money. Its support base very well may see this as a betrayal of those values. Just over the weekend, we saw Shane Jones up in Warkworth at a New Zealand First rally promising to campaign once again on immigration, blaming Labour for allowing an influx of foreigners. I mean, this is New Zealand First's bread and butter, and yet on this occasion it appears to instead have gone for a croissant.
Exactly what was thrashed out behind closed doors we may never know, but in a three-way coalition it's almost certain there will be further compromises down the road. The foreign buyers ban is expected to be passed into law by the end of the year. That was Focus on Politics. I'm Annika Smith. Thanks for joining us. Mā te wā.